Good? That's good. That's good.
Great.
Make sure you pay attention. It's a long day. So, we're members of Team BioFUELS. I'm Femi Colloquia. The rest of our team, I'll just go and let everybody else introduce themselves.
Hello, Alex, Kate, Mike, Ted.
I do know everybody's name, but I just want to. Our presentation today will cover a brief overview of BioFUELS and some background information. This will lead into our developed research questions and original methodology. We will then explain our first year results and their implications and changes we made, to formulate a second methodology. Afterwards, we'll comment on our current progress and offer some advice to you as you begin the research process, and allow for questions at the end of the presentation. Initially, it is important to understand what biofuels are and why we decided to do further research into their viability as a potential alternative energy source. Biofuels, in the most general of senses, are some of the most promising answers to the current energy crisis. Alternative energy is no longer necessary as an alternative, but more of a necessity for many people. The dependence of the United States on fossil fuels has led to a dependence on foreign-based oil and petroleum. Biofuels are a range of fossil fuels and mixed fuels that are processed from plant biomass. Through a refining process, which are common processes are taking a solid biomass and refining it into a pellet that can be burned, and making a liquid biofuel, and also a heated gas process that can be used to heat up things as an energy source. The types of these fuels began to gain public attention, especially after political attention started to focus on renewable energy as a resource. The U.S. Department of Energy and Department of Agriculture recommended that 30% of petroleum currently used be replaced with renewable biofuels by the year 2030, which is not too far from that. Corn ethanol in the form of E85, which is 85% ethanol and 15% gasoline, is the most commonly used biofuel today. But it's not considered to be sustainable to reach this goal. Cellulosic biomass has been a new focus in the wake of technological advancements. The industry focus on corn ethanol has led to much political discussion. If corn ethanol is the choice to meet this goal, this will greatly reduce the amount of arable farmland used for foodstuff production, as 998 million tons of biomass would be needed annually. Corn must be rotated as a crop because of the vast amounts of nutrients it derives from the soil to grow. As such, more agriculturally viable land needs to be used and artificial fertilizers to help with the nutrient debt. Even so, production is expected to plateau by the year 2015, which is just a few years from now. 21 billion gallons of liquid fuels will be needed by the year 2022, again, not too far from now, to overcome this pitfall, according to the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007. These options can lead to government subsidies and similarly develop infrastructure for an alternative method of fuel production. A necessary plant for maximum benefit production needs to be found first. I'll now pass it on to Kai Xie to discuss our choice for this point.
Thanks so much, Benny. Everyone's still awake? Stay strong. All right. There's a couple of reasons why we mainly chose miscanthus as our plant of research. The first reason is like the plant itself, like physiology, what it is, what it does. It's a large perennial grass. Perennial means that it grows back every single year. You don't have to replant it every year like corn. So corn dies at the end of each growing season, whereas miscanthus, only the top part dies, the root system stays dormant in the winter, allowing it to regrow in the spring and summer. The other thing is that it actually, once it starts each cycle, it actually grows larger and larger and larger. So first cycle, it's the shortest, but the second growing season, the third growing season, it's going to get taller and taller, and that produces just basically more biomass as time goes on. It's sterile and non-invasive. That means that it will not hybridize with any other plant life in the local ecosystem, meaning that it's not invasive. It can't spread. It can't spread its genomes to other plants. That's been an issue for plants like corn, which can easily spread. Right now, it's being currently used in Europe, or at least it's being explored in Europe. I'll touch on that further. But it also requires little maintenance. It's pretty hardy, and like I said before, it reaches full potential, not the first growing cycle, but the second to the fourth growing cycle. Right now, there's not much research being done in the US currently. There is a research project going on at the University of Illinois, but it does not touch upon some of the topics that we're doing, such as actual conversion using calorimetry, which Mike will discuss later. So in our literature review, this is by far the most important part of the project so far, I feel like. We've looked at more than 70 articles, maybe even 80. What we found was that, mainly this is European stuff, but what we found was that miscanthus itself is very, very hardy. I mentioned before, alluded to this, but if you guys remember back to Snowmageddon last year, we were really worried that our plants were going to die at the end of Snowmageddon because we just didn't expect 5 foot of snow to fall on our plants. This wasn't an issue at all, surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly. All our plants pretty much survived, maybe 1 or 2 died, but we can't really attribute that to purely the harsh conditions because one or two of them died earlier on. So it might have been the snow, might not have been the snow. Basically, the snow wasn't too much of a factor. So we know it's very hardy. This has been tested. This is clearly proven to be the case. We expect that the yields will increase beyond after the first year. So we only have first year data right now. It'll increase definitely, according to the literature. Also, there are some figures for catalytic conversion and pyrolysis, nothing too explicit, as well as some economic comparisons in terms of supply chain management, in terms of the shipping of biofuels and growing costs and stuff like that. But again, nothing in the U.S. that really shows us how this plant grows in the Maryland climate in the U.S. So with that, I'd like to pass it on tonight.
Okay. Y'all hear me? All right. Hang in there, we're halfway through. All right. So to help us direct our research a little bit, we developed 3 different research questions to help us focus our efforts. Our first research question was, how do the biomass yields of Miscanthus giganteus compare with respect to the agricultural viability of the land and the presence of a water-absorbing polymer in the soil? With this, we wanted to test 2 different variables. The first variable was the effect of land quality on the growth of Miscanthus. As Kai mentioned, it's a really hardy plant, and one of the big reasons that corn is a problem as a source of biofuel in the future is that it requires really, really fertile land to grow. So with this, we wanted to see if Miscanthus was capable of growing with appreciable yield on agriculturally marginal land. The other variable that we're testing here is the presence of a water-soaking polymer. Crossing polyacrylamide is a polymer, it's very cheap, it's capable of absorbing water in times of excess and releasing it slowly over time. So if you incorporate this into the soil around the root system of the plant, what you can get is long-term watering without any kind of maintenance. So we wanted to see if we could increase yield on these agriculture marginal land at low cost in an environmentally friendly method. Our second question deals more with comparison to corn, which is how does the energy content of the produced Miscanthus giganteus biomass compare with that of maize? So we wanted to see, first off, whether we can produce more yield from worse land, and second, how this plant measures up in terms of energetic content. Our last question is, what are the cost-benefit characteristics of converting Miscanthus giganteus into a biofuel? So, to get away from the 2 sciencey questions above, we have 2 business majors on our team. We wanted to look more into how the usage of this plant as a potential source of biofuel is going to impact the economy, and how ready the economy is for accepting something like this. So we want to see how feasible it was, or how applicable research was. So our first part of our methodology involves a field study. This is to test mainly our first research question. We took 2 different sites in Maryland, and one was very fertile land, and one was very, very poor land. And we planted 2 different plots there, with and without polymer. I'll show you in detail on the next slide. So here you can see the 2 plots that we planted. The first is Brandywine on the left. This is our agriculturally marginal plot. This was grown on an old gravel mine, all rocks, a lot of sand, very, very low nutritional content. On the right side here, you can see our Woodstock plot, which is very fertile. It's all green in the picture, so I'm sure you can tell what that means. You'll notice that there's 2 big plots and a 6 side plots as well. Now in our big plots, we planted 164 and 181 plants respectively in the spring of last year. We planted these with the non-polymer and the polymer plants in alternating spaces, and we were informed later by one of our experts that this may cause a problem. So we included additional controls later in the year